Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here today at the Department of Health Abu Dhabi stand at Arab Health. This talk today continues a series of the future of healthcare. We'll be talking about research and innovation in life sciences and how that's changed during the COVID-19 pandemic. Welcome to this panel discussion. My name is Nick Webster, a reporter of the national newspaper, and I'm your moderator today. We have never before seen this level of investment, engineering, and ingenuity compressed by industry to fight one disease that we have seen during the global pandemic of COVID-19. It was the largest collective private sector research and development program in history, and Abu Dhabi itself conducted more than 325 research studies contributing to the deployment of innovation and research to address the pandemic globally. The UAE scored the lowest death rates among patients infected with COVID-19 and also topped the world in its vaccination rates. Today, at this panel discussion, I will be speaking with four of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies to learn about how clinical research has changed forever during the onset of the pandemic. With me for this conversation, if you'd like to join me at the stage, please, from the Department of Health, we have Dr. Azma Al-Manai, who is Executive Director of Abu Dhabi's Research and Innovation Centre. Welcome. From AstraZeneca, I'm joined today by Haleb Al-Adab, who is Associate Director for Gulf Government Affairs. Welcome. And from Pfizer, we have Hassam Nazmi, who is Director of Policy and Public Affairs for the Gulf States. GlaxoSmithKline's representative today is Jeff Kamprikos, who is Director of Communications for Government Affairs and Market Access. Welcome, Jeff. And last but not least, from Roche, we have Ahmed Majdi, who is Head of UAE Corporate Communications. Please sit down. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Well, thanks for the time today. It's certainly an interesting topic to see how successful Abu Dhabi was, and the UAE in particular, about handling the pandemic and how you guys worked collectively together behind the scenes and with the Department of Health to have this incredible response against COVID-19. Dr. Azma, if I can start with you, please. During the pandemic, the Department of Health shortened its clinical research review cycle, I understand, from months to just 8 days, if that's right? That's a significant reduction in time. How important was that? And what has the impact of that been since around about January, February time 2020? Let's have a look. Is this on? There we go, try that.
Hello?
It's on? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. This is a very important question. One of the lessons learned during the pandemic is that we have to be an agile regulator. There is time, pressure, challenges that is facing every healthcare regulator around the world. And we have learned that we need to be more agile in dealing with research, because honestly there has been no known cure so far during the pandemic, the early days of the pandemic for COVID. There is no known vaccine, and we need to find solution, and the regulator need to be part of such solution. So we look at our processes. What can we do better? How can we improve and be more enabling and supporting the researcher in order to reach the solution much more fast than the usual process? And we have created a centralized IRB committee that will be responsible for ensuring a shorter period of time in terms of the review. We work 24/7, day and night. And I thank all the members of the committee that are representing the provider side, the academia side, and the scientist side to ensure that all the protocols that they have reviewed are up to the highest standard from an ethical point of view and scientific point of view. And we have achieved it. So it is not only the Department of Health, it's the partnership and the collaboration between different members of the committee and even the above and beyond, the bigger stakeholders that enabled us to achieve this amazing KPI of 8 days maximum for from submission to decision. And I believe this is one of the key successful factors.
There have been many success stories that we will come on to shortly, both in vaccines, as we all know about, and also antiviral treatments and other treatments for the seriously ill. We'll come on to that later on. Hello, if I can come to you with AstraZeneca. I mean, the company names, maybe people outside of medicine didn't know much about companies like Pfizer or GSK or AstraZeneca. Now, they're front and center of how we live our lives, getting vaccines, getting boosters. How did AstraZeneca change as a company from the onset of the pandemic to become almost a vaccine company in its own right? Can you explain a bit more about that process and how that evolved?
Thank you, Nick, and thanks for the opportunity of being here among the esteemed guests. To be honest, I'll build on what Dr. Asma was just saying. It's all about that agility and the mindset of change. So we've all been faced with the same pandemic. And at AstraZeneca, basically, we always had that understanding that no one is safe unless everybody is safe. And that was our key starting point. How can we live our value of patient centricity and make sure that we're part of that solution? And that's how basically we used and lived to the maximum our collaborative mindset and partnership agenda was brought to life. So basically we combined the experience and expertise of Oxford University in terms of science into our global manufacturing and development capabilities, and took a pledge of making sure that we are distributing equitably and broadly the vaccine to the world at no profit during the pandemic. And today we proudly say that basically around 2.5 billion doses of our vaccine has been supplied to 170 countries, out of which basically 2/3 of them are to low and lower to middle income countries. But this partnership agenda did not stop on the vaccine, because yes, the vaccine are great tools to manage the pandemic. However, again, we had to put patient first. And that's where we accelerated, and back to Dr. Asma's point about the acceleration of processes, how we accelerated to bring a hope to patients who cannot benefit from vaccines. So the high-risk patients, the immunocompromised patients. And that's how, again, through our collaboration with the UAE authorities, the Department of Health, the Ministry of Health, we made sure that the UAE was among the first countries in the world to procure, to register, and to receive and administer Evusheld, which is our monoclonal antibody combination targeting immunocompromised patients and patients who cannot really benefit from vaccines. So it's all back again to your question. It's all about the agility, the collaborative mindset, and the willing to change.
And I guess that agility will continue as we see these drugs develop in the future, where they, for that last mile of vaccination programs around the world, particularly in low middle income countries where drugs might well be administered intramuscular rather than intravenously, to enable healthcare practitioners to deliver it all over the world in areas where it might be harder to get clinics working. If I can come to Pfizer, Hossam Nazmi, welcome.
Thanks, Nick.
I think we all know about Pfizer now around the world, one of the key vaccines in this pandemic. What did government authorities do to enable access to the innovation and the acceleration that process brought during the pandemic? Can you explain a bit about how that worked as well, please?
Nick, thank you very much actually for the excellent question. And before I answer the question, I would like really to thank you and thank the Department of Health for the invitation, for being here today, and to speak to you and speak to the audiences. So the COVID pandemic is one of the diseases that actually we have never seen before in the history. Actually, it touched everyone in the world. And it has made us think about things that we did not actually thought it could be exist 2 years back. So this is for us as Pfizer and industry, and also for the governments. So I can speak, of course, a lot about what actually Pfizer did to come up with this vaccine to save the world. But to answering your question about what exactly the government did, they did a lot of things. from the strategy of the rulers of the country, first of making the vaccines and treatments available with no doubt about it, with the confidence they give to their people and to the residents in the country. And then going to the execution itself. Adopting the concept of learning as we go was one of the most important things that the government authorities adopted and executed here, because nobody actually was aware about what is happening or what is going to happen after 1 month or 2 months. And then the speed they brought to the regulatory processes we have never seen before. The level of communication with the pharma industry, the day-to-day updates about what is happening, and also the readiness from the government side to be a partner in the innovation itself. So when we spoke first about the vaccine which could come in a 6 month or 7 month, they considered the government as partners in the innovation. So they were ready to take the risk and to think with us and to give us all we need to make the vaccine available in the country. Think about the infrastructure that the government made here in the country to give the vaccine to everyone. So this is actually not easy. Think about the number of nurses, the number of doctors, even to the needles were actually used in the vaccination.
Yep.
Think about the supply chain, how the vaccine was actually stored, how it was shipped from the manufacturing site to the vaccination site day by day. It was not actually a shipment per year, it was happening every day. So how this vaccine was actually stored, distributed to the vaccination center, behind the scene actually was actually a lot of efforts. And the result of that the rate of vaccination in the Emirates actually was the top among the world. This was during vaccine. So what actually happening after that for the innovation in the life science? I'm really proud to share that we have signed with the Department of Health and with the support of Dr. Asma last month in December a memorandum of understanding. The concept of this memorandum of understanding is to train researchers to be a qualified researcher. We are targeting 100 researchers in the first year and to reach to 500 qualified researchers in 2025.
Wow.
Those researchers will be able to execute a phase 1 and drug innovation clinical trials in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. And of course, this is supportive to the vision of the country to have the country and the Emirate of Abu Dhabi as a destination for the healthcare in the whole world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It seems like the UAE is really becoming a hotbed for clinical research now, and it's the go-to destination for science. That will attract talent as well in the future to come here and complete this kind of research. Jeff, if I can come to you, welcome. There's been many success stories during the pandemic with certain drugs and treatments, as we well know. We've seen the emergence of new variants, particularly Omicron, become the dominant variant around the world. And I'd like to get from you just the process of changing the vaccines and how easy or difficult that is to cope with these new strains when they emerge, these new mutations. So how easy is it to reformulate or re-engineer a vaccine when these new variants appear, and how long would that typically take in your experience with GSK?
Well, thank you, Nick. Very happy to be on this panel today with my colleagues from the industry and Dr. Asma, of course, one of the pillars of life sciences and biopharma research in Abu Dhabi. So one thing I would like to, just before I address that question, I would like to say it's also been remarkable the amount of research, data, evidence as we moved along on the COVID journey that the Department of Health has put out there, published, and been willing to share. And we've seen this at the federal level and Department of Health Abu Dhabi. And I think as the country that often moved first and as the emirate that moved first, so Abu Dhabi moved first and often in terms of procurement, rollout, changing guidelines, the fact that you pumped out those data, that wasn't just important for the UAE or the Gulf. That was important for the world. I saw media reports relating to our product, our therapeutic, picked up in Brazil, Philippines, Russia, Turkey. The data that the Department of Health was putting out there went global, went worldwide. Now, of course, Nick has asked me the question, the science and the engineering question about vaccines. So you're looking at the guy who's the C student in science and engineering, right? So I knew Nick was going to do this to me. But so what I can tell you is the process, Nick, without getting into the engineering. I mean, GSK is one of the globally leading vaccine companies. I'm up here on the dais with a whole bunch of leaders in that field. And, you know, once these variants are identified and isolated and available to our laboratories, to our scientists, then you're going to get into probably at least a 2 to 3 month kind of engineering, re-engineering process. Let's assume that the vaccine can be rejiggered to address a specific variant. Even if you're able to figure it out in the laboratories how to do that, and the companies up here have remarkable track records in that area, you then have to figure out if you can manufacture it, and then you're going to get into the whole licensing issue and submitting your applications around the world. So, kind of optimistically, you're looking, I think, 3 to 6 months, probably even 6 to 12 months for companies to rejigger these vaccines. And even that is very compressed compared to what we knew before the pandemic. I mean, the closest probably we come to that is the annual flu vaccine, which is re-engineered to address the various mutations, the variants that we have. So we can do it, but when you see companies producing effective new vaccines, let's say in a 3 to 5 month period, that suggests there's a massive acceleration in there, and a lot of the normal processes are being compressed to achieve that.
I see. I mean, sorry. So I think with that in mind, I mean, reproducing new vaccines for the foreseeable future could be a real challenge for the industry. So I guess there's work going on behind the scenes to work out a way how they get around that. And that will continue, I'd imagine, yeah?
Yeah, there's the science, there's the engineering, there's also the manufacturing piece.
Yeah.
We're talking about large volumes. We're talking about billions of vials that need to be produced at the same quality, replicated over and over again. We're trying to avoid batch failures because there's only so much capacity in the system typically. And then, of course, even once you have it, and we know from the HOPE Consortium here in Abu Dhabi, we know that even when you have it, then you're getting into storage, the distribution, the administration, often the refrigeration issues, the transport, the safe transport. So it's a complicated process, but it's really remarkable. I have to say, I've worked in the industry 30 years, and I've never been prouder to work in this industry than the last 2 years. I mean, you don't see the phone calls, but behind the scenes, we call each other and we cheer each other on all the time. Right?
This is what I was going to ask. My next question, actually, for Ahmed at Roche. Researching the background for the panelists here today, they all get along, they all know each other, they talk behind the scenes, and having this competition, these rivals, you wouldn't necessarily think that, but they do have these conversations. Ahmed, I wanted to ask you just how the communication process changed during the pandemic with your rivals, with your competitors, and how did that accelerate the process of bringing new medicines into the market here in the UAE?
It's an excellent question, Nick. Thank you so much, and thanks for Abu Dhabi Department of Health for the kind invitation to have this opportunity with the respected panel. I will reflect on what mentioned by Jeff. I think COVID-19 gave a great example about the power and the importance of collaboration and partnership. Collaboration with the government, with the healthcare community, and even with the pharmaceutical industry within each others, and even with non-traditional stakeholders. And the reason behind that there is a big responsibility to transform people's lives as well as to ensure the healthcare sustainability. Roche, as a global leader in pharmaceutical and diagnostics, played a major role when it comes for being under one roof, being the leader in personalized healthcare with truly differentiated medicine across different disease areas like infectious disease, ophthalmology, and oncology. And that put Roche in a position to be at the forefront, building on the expertise of the infectious disease, because COVID needs multiple approach when it comes to management the disease and the associated disease. And looking at last year, we are honored to have our partnership and collaboration with Dr. Asma and Abu Dhabi Department of Health to support Abu Dhabi vision to establish as a life science hub, as well as for the longer term vision of healthier Abu Dhabi. Talking about the topic of the innovation and access and research, we are all aware about that the product development process is lengthy and costly. And the need for effective, reliable diagnostic solutions is bigger than before. That's why Roche invested in genomic profiling and real-world data partnership, and that was reflected on the level of investment that Roche is doing in research and development by investing more than 12 billion CHF on an annual basis. And this level of contribution reflected in the people health by having Roche 32 medicines that are listed in the WHO.
Wow. Incredible numbers there.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Asma, if I may come back to you, if that's okay, for a follow-up question. Now, prior to the pandemic, Arab scientists all over the world have contributed amazing research. I think during the pandemic, for the first time, we saw that coming from the UAE. We saw the research coming from this country and being delivered all around the world for the benefit of the global population. How can the UAE build on that going forward and attract more clinical research to come to this country?
Excellent question. Actually, what we didn't do it alone. I mean, it's partnership. One of the key elements here in the success that we had during the response to COVID was in the partnership. So, and we realized the partnership is important even before COVID. We were fortunate to have our pharma colleagues and friends being with us in an advisory committee. We are establishing a collaborative approach. We ask, we discuss. We really don't have a specific boundaries for certain stakeholders. We have an open communication platform, transparency. We share our policies. What do you think? Because we believe that our partners are part of the solution. And it is not a directive approach. It's not just one line. It's a horizontal, collaborative approach. We go back and forth. We challenge. We ask. And we solve the problems together. And I believe learning to be agile is something that is now we became very proficient in. And when we can deliver the outcomes much faster, much efficient, why should we slow down? So we'll continue our partnership together, we'll continue being agile, and we'll continue to and perform as the best regulator that any partner would wish to be. And we would like to deliver the certain expectation because I believe we have a mutual objectives and there is always a win-win situation in any condition as long as we have a focus on the goal, a focus on the where do we want to reach, then we can all together achieve within their own specific elements of contributions, we can achieve and reach that goal. And we want to position Abu Dhabi as a life science hub in the region and in the world.
It seems well on course for that. Thank you, Dr. Asma.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hala, if I can come back to you for a secondary question. The challenges ahead with dealing with COVID-19 treatments and how that will look in the years ahead. Managing that alongside the continued development of other treatments that will always be needed for oncology, for cardiovascular disease, for respiratory diseases. And this is all part of the UAE national agenda. How will pharma companies deal with that balance of managing COVID and these ongoing treatments that will always be required?
So thanks, Nick. That's a really important question. Simply because patients suffering from these specific therapy areas that you've mentioned were the most vulnerable during the pandemic. Their lives were the most impacted when we had no vaccines on the table. So they are the ones that, with the Department of Health and the authorities in the UAE, we were jointly thinking of how can we serve them better? How can we reach out to them? And that's where, again, it's working hand in hand, the collaborative approach. We focused during the pandemic, first and foremost, to continue making sure that these patients have access to their medication, whether through home-based care, whether through direct contact with the ministries, with the Department of Health and authorities. These patients need to keep on taking their medication. So that was the first thing that we've done. But in parallel, we also worked on bringing the hope I was talking about earlier. So that's the monoclonal antibody tackling this segment of immunocompromised patients. But the future is also coming with lots of learning. And the word acceleration was well spot on, because basically now we need to accelerate the adoption of new technologies. So the pandemic has come with lots of learning and pushed us out of our comfort zone, creating a new ways of working in the mindset of every of our esteemed companies. And hence, the use of new technologies, data, diagnostics, clinical research in these specific therapy areas that you've kindly mentioned will remain the focus, in addition to what's happening on the pandemic. But the main focus will be the chronic non-communicable diseases, basically.
Okay, that's good to hear. I think we've got time for a couple more questions as we keep rolling. Hossam, if I can come back to you, if that's okay. We know about the great work Pfizer's done with the vaccine production and the work you've done behind the scenes with your competitors here. Do you think we are in a new era of collaboration in this area of scientific research? Big pharma companies working together behind the scenes for the benefit of mankind. Is this going to be more of a common theme we're going to see in the future? Or do you expect to see a return to the pre-pandemic competition that we've historically seen with pharmaceutical companies?
Jeff?
I know you're all friends, really.
This is actually an unusual question, but it's actually a very good one. And it's a good chance to let the audience know what's happening behind the scene. So just think about two lifeguards who are running to save a life of a person. So do you think this is a competition? I actually cannot find a word to describe this, but if it is a competition, so it is a good one. So they compete for the first one who reach and save his life. And this is what exactly we do in the pharma. The collaboration between the pharma industry is old, actually. It's not a new thing that happened with the COVID. So maybe you know about the Pharma Association, which is the pharmaceutical association for the manufacture of medicine in America. This has been established, I think, in 1958. So long time back, the pharma industry, the manufacturers and the researchers are sitting together to see what actually they can do to save the life for the patients. So there is a lot of pharma association present in the world, like the IFPMA, the International Federation for the Pharmaceutical Manufactured and Association, and also all pharmaceutical companies are members here. So what exactly they do in such kind of forums or associations? So we discuss a lot of subjects, from regulatory, clinical research, legal and compliance, medical, different policies actually, and sometimes trade barriers that prevent or make the access difficult for the patients. So we collaborate, we discuss. And here in the Gulf we have the PharMag, which is the association for the international pharmaceutical companies, which it has almost, I think now 25 companies, international companies, and all the colleagues sitting here, they are members in this association. So during COVID, there was a kind of partnership also between us, and it has been announced with the beginning of association of the crisis of the COVID that we collaborated. Some companies actually, they provided manufacturing facilities to other companies to produce medicine. I mean, so we are all one actually in fighting the diseases, and we are all one in providing the tools that help the healthcare professionals and the governments to save life.
I see.
So I hope this answered the question. So if we go back again to the competition, as you were just saying, so it's good and healthy one, and I'm happy really to be part of this industry.
Healthy competition is good for everybody, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I was going to ask Jeff about changes to regulation, but go on, Jeff. You want to?
Just wanted to say, again, this year I'm coming up on my 30th year in the research-based pharmaceutical industry, and I've come to the conclusion over the years that we can compete fiercely, but we can also collaborate fiercely. And Hossam touched on a lot of the important elements of that. For years we've had cross-licensing agreements, joint collaborations on research projects. So it's not unusual to us. I think what was a little bit different was the pace in the last year or two. It really accelerated during COVID. Most our companies do work together, but we also compete pretty pretty darn hard in the market too, which is, as you said, a good thing.
Yeah. My follow-up question to you was going to be about how the regulations had changed and accelerated, but I wanted to focus on one of the biggest success stories of the pandemic, which was the development of sotrovimab and how that developed, and the UAE became the first country to have that into patients who are really ill, critically ill, and it helped save many lives. Can you explain to me briefly how that looked behind the scenes? You know, because it was quite a dramatic story, I understand.
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, I want to say working with the DOH and Abu Dhabi is exhilarating and exhausting. So when you work with today's DOH, you're working with the team like you say, okay, well, we could give you a briefing on that. And DOH will say to you, okay, how about tomorrow morning? So you have to reconfigure your organization to meet the expectations of today's DOH. I'll give you an example on sotrovimab. I think the original delivery contract was 4 to 6 weeks after licensing here in the UAE, and the UAE was the second country in the world to license the product within hours of US FDA. So, you know, GSK's looking at it, 4 to 6 weeks, that's pretty ambitious. I think we had a call the next day. Can you deliver within 4 to 6 days? So when you work with DOH, you need to get on your horse and ride. And we've had to change, you know, our conventional approach working with Abu Dhabi. These guys are in a hurry, and that's a good thing. I think, you know, what we saw was in terms of, I'll go back to collaboration and partnership. From the earliest days when we reached out and we said, hey, we think we might have an effective therapeutic, DOH asked for regular updates, medical updates. We provided those. We started working on the procurement very early, on the supply very early, because this was a globally constrained supply product. We talked about how we might have to change the guidelines very early. You know, the night the delivery arrived from Italy, I was on the tarmac, Abu Dhabi airport. The plane rolled up. These guys were so fast. 3 hours later, they infused the first patient. She survived, by the way, that patient. So everything about it is in quick time when you're working with DOH. The other thing I'll add is, because Nick, you asked about a specific product. I think the colleagues had similar experiences. But what I really liked about DOH during the pandemic was they didn't freeze and paralyze. Like, you know, Dr. Asma mentioned earlier, they continued to put the reforms in place and new policies in place to drive that ambition of a biopharma and life sciences hub. So kind of, not only are they fast, but they walk and chew gum.
This fast decision-making process seemed very important to get us to where we are today, I suppose, with hopefully coming out of the pandemic. Ahmed, lastly, if I can just come to you for one final question, please. The relationship you had with regulators in the UAE before the pandemic compared to now, how has that changed, and what impact has that been on how the industry worked and is working here?
First of all, I have to share something. What we are seeing now that Abu Dhabi Department of Health is showing a leadership role for being the connector and the catalyst for short, medium, and long-term outcome. And this is something that is really motivating to have such a discussion today. Yet, I want to highlight something which is very important, that the population age and grow while reducing the cost of the society for better outcome for patients. There is a clear need for efficient and targeted research and development, as well as there is a great importance of robust healthcare ecosystem sharing knowledge and integrated personalized approach to empower the patient to manage their own health. Why I'm sharing this today? I'm sharing this today because this is actually the core of our partnership with Abu Dhabi Department of Health. We had a one vision and one goal, that we need to deliver best outcome for the patient faster, inspired by the personalized and value-based healthcare approach, where each patient will receive the tailored medical advances based on their own disease and lifestyle. And imagine if you have the data and the technology focusing on the value rather than volume, how the system will learn and how the data will be turned into insights. And then when the system is learning, the patient will benefit and the people will benefit. And this is the core actually for our partnership. And just for an example, data from clinical studies and patient and real-world data will help us to offer a tailored care for the patient, as well as will support significantly in the discovery of the new medicine. And here has come the role of the regulator by having an informed decision to accelerate access for innovation.
Yeah.
And this is something that we are witnessing in our collaboration with UAE and Abu Dhabi Department of Health.
Okay, thank you, Ahmed. Real insight there. If I can open the floor to any questions for the floor at all for our esteemed panel here today. Does anybody have any questions at all? No, nothing? Sorry? Very clear and efficient, yeah. Answered everyone's questions for them. If I can just pick on Jeff one last time, I've got a minute here. I was very lucky to get an invitation to go to see the GSK production plant in Belgium in, I think it was December 2019. Literally the same month, ready for emergency use. How is that possible to reduce that time span for bringing those drugs to market so quickly?
So I realize we've got about a minute. So I think what we kind of forget, Nick, is that all of the companies up here, we all invest anywhere between, let's say, 5, 6, and almost $15 billion a year in R&D. The industry as a whole invests more than $150 billion a year in R&D. This is just private sector R&D spending. So although we had to come up with these vaccines and therapeutics in very short time, like a year, we're working off platforms and science that's been going on for decades. So like, the mRNA technology platform has actually been known to us for a couple decades. Now, the trick is how fast a Pfizer or a GSK or a Moderna can turn that into a viable product. But a lot of the research is there. Where we spend a lot of time, and this is unavoidable, will always be in the clinical research, and particularly in vaccines. You're talking tens of thousands of patients that have to be enrolled in these trials. But the good news is, we learn from our mistakes. We invest heavily every year. The public sector invests a lot in basic research. So when you combine it all up, even faced with a deadly pandemic, there's a lot to work with. There's a lot that's gone on for many, many years. There's a lot of scientific genius and capability there to work from.
I see. Thanks, Jeff. So in summary, if I bring this discussion to a close, if I could just go over a few points raised by the panel. Dr. Asma, you mentioned that partnerships are very important and crucial for this collaborative approach going forward towards solving problems together. And that's likely to continue for the future, for sure, to make Abu Dhabi a hotbed for life sciences going forward, yeah? Haleb, you mentioned about being agile and how important that was as part of the whole process of bringing new drugs to the market, and also prioritizing patients who are seriously ill during these difficult times to make sure they also have access to the medication they need to manage their chronic conditions, okay? Hossam, you mentioned this incredible idea about this memorandum of understanding you have to develop new researchers here in the country. I think it was to train researchers up to 500 by 2025. That's a real interesting aspect to your points raised today, and we look forward to seeing how that develops in the years to come, I think. So that's one to keep an eye on. And Jeff, you cited the remarkable amount of research that's gone on over the last 2 years, and just the data that is now available in almost these live world trials rather than clinical trials, and the impact that's had as well on bringing these drugs to market. And Ahmed, your points, again, really fascinating insight there into what Roche is doing behind the scenes. And I think, again, your point with the clinical data and the value of that, making Abu Dhabi once again becoming a real hotbed of life sciences in the years ahead, and how pharmaceutical companies are working behind the scenes to make sure that happens faster than ever. So thank you guys for your points today. Really interesting. And that brings today to a close. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you. Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you. Well done. Thanks, Jeff. First one. Thank you. That was really good. Thank you.